Hey guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica and I'm your host, and you can follow me on Twitter at @it'sJessino. On today's show, we're going to be talking about Xhaka's new contract that's looking like it's well and on its way. He's close to signing a new deal that's going to keep him at Arsenal until 2025. We'll also discuss Maddison and the deal for him. There were reports that came out earlier today that the deal is progressing. I don't know how far advanced it actually is, but the deal is progressing. There may be a player that is added into the deal to make the deal a little bit easier. So we'll kind of talk about who that potential player could be. And, if you guys are feeling this Maddison news, it's so funny that this comes out literally the day after we do our final predictions. Me, Souls, and George did our final predictions for the transfer window. They predicted that Maddison would come in. I predicted Odegaard would come in. And needless to say, in the group chat, I was in the mud as usual. So there you go. There's also Martinez reports that came out earlier that he wants to come to Arsenal, or he's open to coming to Arsenal, and Inter are willing to sell him as well. And there's also reports that we are going to be putting together a very attractive package for Martinez to get him over to the Emirates should he want to come to Arsenal. So we'll also kind of discuss that and whether or not we believe that the Lukaku to Chelsea situation will affect our ability to bring in Lautaro Martinez, and also the glaringly obvious issue of us still having Nketiah and Lacazette. And is that also kind of a bump in the road in us being able to acquire a new striker? Aziz, there's a little bit of news on him as well, that he won't be loaned out. So this is somebody that I think is a little bit further in his progression than I probably thought he was. I said earlier in a previous stream that I thought Aziz would probably be better off, having a loan. So seeing that he's not going to have the loan, I do think that he'll spend most of his time in the under 23s. But it just kind of got me thinking a little bit more about our central midfield options and whether or not we do need to push to bring in another central midfielder, even though Xhaka is going to stay. It just feels as though we are always one injury away from catastrophe. And is there a way that Arsenal can still bring in a central midfielder, give that person enough playing time to make it worth it, and not have to rely on somebody like Aziz and let him stay in the under 23s to continue his development? Can Willock be an opportunity for us to capitalize? He's somebody that Newcastle is said to be truly interested in and willing to spend the 22 million to get him to the Emirates, or not to the Emirates, to Newcastle. But could we use that 22 million to bring in another midfielder? That's something that I feel like people are not really thinking about. I put that out there on Twitter and I got a lot of pushback, on Willock, and we should just keep him. And he has these qualities that we can't afford to lose. But the reality for me is that we never seem to know when to sell, and Joe Willock's value will never be as high as it is now. And with his contract length, I think it's the right time to sell. So there is a community poll that I put out about Willock, and I want to know what you guys think about Willock's future. Would you sell him now if Newcastle came up to the valuation of 22 million to acquire Joe Willock from us? Or would you keep him knowing that we're a little light in midfield, as kind of already discussed? So go ahead and get voting on that poll. It should be out now. And there's about 100 of you guys watching right now on all platforms. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And I have Souls here with me. Hey, Souls, how are you?
I'm good. Sorry, I was just watching Love Island. It just finished now.
You're watching Love Island.
Yeah, man, it's good, isn't it? Yeah, big up Toby. For the people who watch it in the chat will know what I'm talking about. Big up Toby. Big up Toby.
I'm like behind or whatever, but I heard every week I hear something about Toby. Toby's doing this, Toby's doing that, but let's just get started with the Xhaka news. I think it's so funny how quickly it went from like, okay, well, 70% he's still going, 30% he'll stay. Now it's pretty much solidified that he's going to stay. So I think, okay, so we can get over the fact that he'll be staying for another season, but do you think it's risky to give him a new deal on improved terms? Do you think it's risky for us to give him a higher salary? Does that kind of spell out the fact that maybe we don't think we'll sell him next season? Because if you think it's hard to sell him now, don't you think it'd be more difficult to sell him on higher wages, on a higher, with more years on his deal and him a year or so older? What do you think?
It's a bit of a strange one because as much as I am quite against this whole give him an improved deal anyway. I can understand an extension with a slightly improved deal, but it seems to be a 25 million over the 4 years, which is quite a bit. But this is what I've always said, and this has been my opinion from the beginning, and it'll still remain my opinion. If it forces us to go and get a different profile of midfielder, then I'm all for it. Because if it forces us to go and get a Kamara or a Basuma or a midfielder of that sort of nature, then I'm not entirely against it, but that's if Arsenal do it, and that's a big if. But at the same time, it's one of those where all right, we're not getting rid of him this summer. It seems to be forget about the contract extension. It just seems like it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't something which we weren't getting the deal we wanted. We feel like he's being underpaid, undervalued, which, to be honest with you, it is a buyer's market. It's what they're willing to pay is what you accept. Otherwise, you've got to deal with the consequences. And on this moment, it's the fact that Xhaka's got I think it was 2 years left on his contract. Obviously, now he's got an extension for a further 2. The thing is, it could turn out to be a smart thing to do if Xhaka does replicate the form he has shown. And I'm not one of these kind of Xhaka outers who's not going to admit that, yeah, he had a good season. I'm not going to say he had an outstanding season, but for his sort of standards, it was a good season. It was a lot more improved in comparison to what we've seen previously. And then if you tie the Euros into that, do you know what? Fair enough. And then if he can have another season of that level, then maybe, just maybe, we'll get our 25 million, 30 million pound that we want for Xhaka. And it could turn out to be one of the best things that Arsenal's done. But that is the biggest if. That is a hypothetical scenario, which can, the total opposite could happen and his value completely plummets because Xhaka turns to Xhaka. But I don't know where I stand until I know what the midfielder coming in is. But I think ultimately for me, for this deal to make sense, it has to be a Basuma type signing. I'm not saying it has to be him. It would be very good if it's Basuma. I would absolutely love it. But it has to be something like that. If we then go and still proceed for Locatelli, then it wouldn't make any sense in my head. Why are we going for Locatelli and keeping Xhaka without any changes? Just the same profile, the same type of player, and it doesn't change anything. So
they want the same profile, Souls. I think what they basically their options, the fact that they never really stepped up any interest on Basuma, would lead me to believe that this is the profile that they truly want. If you go after a Locatelli, if you're looking at a Coop Minor, if you're willing to keep a Xhaka, maybe this is just the profile that they want. There's what we would like, which I think a lot of us are pretty much like, let's do something different. But maybe the club is just convinced that this double pivot with a more deep lying playmaker plus a box to box and Thomas Partey is the way forward.
Yeah, and it is an interesting one, because if that's the system he wants to play, then fair enough. Then maybe there is a plan to the madness in this. But I think what it is a lot of the time, and me included, I think it's because we've not seen Xhaka do anything for Arsenal, and it's not Xhaka that was good. It was the fact that because before ESR came in, that whole midfield was shit. And that's me talking but I can't really include Partey in that, because he came and he was injured and he was in and out, and we know he was rushed back. He was meant to come back in January and he started playing in November. It was just too early to what they expected him to come back. I could understand if they'd said he might be back in 2-3 weeks' time and he came back a week early. That's all right, fair enough. That's a good margin. But to come back a month or two early, I was like, I know the guy might be working miracles, that Bruno guy, but this is beyond the miracle. God had to come down himself and cure him, if that's how quick it was. And we could see it. Partey played with an injury the entire time, but Xhaka, just for me, it was even in his best season, I wasn't convinced, and that got to tell you something, that maybe it's time to cut your losses. But I understand where the Xhaka stands come from, where they say, look, it was one of his most productive seasons. And yes, I think he was amongst the top 10 midfielders in progressive passing. So maybe it doesn't meet the eye test. I don't see it as much as many other people do. But I do give him the credit, and I'm not one of those haters who's going to sit there and go, you know what, I want Xhaka out. I don't care what he's done, this, that, the other. I want to see more. And I think for Arsenal to be a top 6, top 4 contender, unfortunately, I think the reality is Xhaka cannot be in that midfield for us to be a top 6, top 4 contender. When you start to look at all of the top 6 midfielders and you think, who really is worse than Xhaka? Not many.
I mean, when we start talking about a different profile, a lot of Arsenal fans continue to talk about Joe Willock as somebody that could potentially have that different profile that we're looking for. Somebody that's a little bit more athletic, that can get into the box, that can score goals. And I tend to really push back on that. I have a hard time, seeing Joe Willock in a pivot. I have a hard time quantifying him as a number 10 that fits in our system. He's the third midfielder in a midfield 3, and we don't necessarily play that way. Even Ramsey, we had a hard time trying to figure out where to play him, and they're quite similar. I know they're not on the same level, but they're kind of that same. They're not the guy that you want the ball at their feet. That's the guy that you want to kind of finish off moves. And our midfielders are ball heavy. They need to be technical players that can play with the ball at their feet. But there's a lot of pushback on social media about Arsenal potentially selling Joe Willock, and Newcastle has not bought anybody yet. And the rumor going around is that they're willing to, spend the 22 million, which is our valuation on Joe Willock. And I'm very shocked at the amount of people that are saying we should keep him. I understand that we have a shortage in midfield that's making people feel a little bit leery, but don't you think it might be a better idea to use the 22 million that we get for Joe Willock and use that to maybe bring in another midfielder, or address right back if we're unable to get a fee for Bellerin? I'm not convinced, and I look at Joe Willock as well, and I'm like, if we loan him to Newcastle or even keep him for another season at Arsenal, he's going to only have 1 year left on his deal. So we're not going to be able to sell him then. Do you really think that we're going to be able to get 30 to 40 million for Joe Willock? I don't think so. And if he's not scoring the goals that he scored for Newcastle for us, do you actually want him in your midfield? So that being said, Souls, is there any justification for keeping Joe Willock? And is this just another time where we need to know when to sell and we need to just go ahead and get it done and not look back?
The thing is, Willock as a player, I've always said it, he's a mid-table player, or a system that plays in that mid-table level. For example, West Ham exceeded what they were meant to do. Aston Villa came from the brinks of relegation to becoming a top 10 side. Now, he suits those systems purely because they're not asked to play technical football. Like Joe Willock wouldn't come into a Man City or even any Pep side. Even if Pep was building a mid-table team to become a top 4 team, Willock wouldn't fit that because technical players technical teams are not going to buy him. But on Newcastle, he's free to do what he wants. He's not got any reins. He's not got any restrictions, and that's why these mid-table or lower teams are there, because they don't really have the tactical prowess to be able to beat the top teams. And that's why Willock did so well. He wasn't told to do a specific role. He was kind of told to go out there and play his football. And yes, with some players, you can do that. But in the system Arsenal's trying to play, we don't have room for that. We can't, because Willock doesn't fit the 10. It doesn't really, we don't play an 8 as in a traditional free 8 in a midfield 3. What we need is a 6 and a box-to-box. And that is Partey. And I don't even think he comes into Partey's role and does that effectively, because he's not that deep playing pivot or CDM central midfielder, which is what we're wanting our double pivot to do, is cover the defense and cover the box, but one of them's going to always stay back and allow the next one to go forward. And it's just one of those weird times. And the reason why all these fan base is like, no, because it could be another Gnabry moment. And it's PTSD from the past dealings that we had. But the thing is, you've got to look at it. It's different scenarios. Gnabry failed at West Brom as well after leaving Arsenal. It's not like he was good for us, but all he had was an attitude problem. No, he went to Bayern Munich, and that's when he fixed up, because you started to realize he needed to take his career seriously. Willock, this is the prime time, and this is where I don't get Arsenal fans. We complain about the fact we haven't taken opportunities in the past to sell our players. Willock, I don't see coming to the level of a Xhaka or an ESR. Those guys have a lot higher ceilings, and they're the types of players, yes, you protect at all costs. You don't want to sell them now because their ceilings are much higher. Willock doesn't fit, and if we keep him, the only thing that's going to happen is his valuation is going to plummet, because he's firstly not going to play. The only times he's going to play is Carabao Cup, maybe at the beginning of the FA Cup. I don't see him playing in the Premier League because, firstly, like I said, we don't have a role for him, nor do we have the space for him either. So I think it's one of those, if they come in with I think it was 22 million was sort of the rumored value, but then we're pushing it to, they might be able to push it to 25 million. So if that's the case, it's time to sell. It's like, I don't know why we wouldn't.
Exactly. And I hear people saying like, well, he's a proven goal scorer. He's a proven goal scorer at Newcastle. I think we really overrate what it's not that. And first of all, I don't think we should change our system to suit Joe Willock. I think we keep our system for our better players, and ESR and Saka and Martinelli. We play to their strengths because they're our future. Changing the system to suit Joe Willock just seems so counterintuitive, right? But he scored goals at Newcastle. And when he scored goals for us, it was in the Europa League against really, really poor opposition. So I get what you're saying about proven goal scorers, but to just ignore the system in its entirety, I feel like is making the argument about him being a goal scorer quite weak, because he just doesn't fit in our system.
But that's
He's not a proven goal scorer for us.
It's like Lingard. It's like when people use the argument, he's a proven goal scorer. Yes, he's done it for West Ham for 6 months or half a season. But for about 7-8 seasons he's been at United, he hasn't done that. So it's like the argument's flawed in itself, because we've got a larger sample size at Arsenal, and to be honest with you, any under 23 midfielder would have scored against those teams in a more advanced role, which is what Willock played in the Europa League. So you've got to look at it in that context. What's he done in the Premier League? What's he done against a top opposition? And if he's proving it against them week in, week out, then yes, you can bring the proven goal scorer. But to say it in a loan move, and not to say 6-month loan move as well, it's a bit ludicrous. And he's a super sub for most of it.
Exactly. Adam Vogue, if you guys don't follow him on Twitter, you should. He puts up the most amazing graphics and gives us a very nice visual representation of what we're talking about in terms of statistics for Arsenal, players that we're looking at, players that already exist within the club. So make sure you're following him. Let me see if I still have his tag up here. If I don't, I'll just write it in a second. But Adam says Willock has 1 Premier League goal in 14 games at Arsenal. And that is the best indication of what he is at Arsenal. It's not about development. I think it's more about the system just doesn't suit him. And it's just time to sell, you guys. I mean, he could be a Narbry, but I feel like he'll be more like an Iwobi. Somebody that we sold, we got a good chunk of money for, that we never thought twice about after we sold him. And that's perfectly fine, you know, but there are a lot of people in the chat asking about, so what can we do in terms of at least getting a little bit more in terms of like a buyback or a sell on? Is that something you would like to see inserted into his contract, or, you know, into the deal, to make sure that we get a little bit extra for, just in case he does become like this superstar?
We can do. It's not important to me anyway, because the thing is, I look at it and I go, he just doesn't fit what we're doing. Will he fit in the future? Well, you can gamble on that and put. I mean, you can always put a buyback clause. I'm guessing it's not the worst thing to do.
A sell-on clause, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
that's better.
They'll probably accept like a 10-15% sell-on clause. I don't think it's the biggest thing, but like I said, it's not the most important thing. Because what will happen is, if they want a sell-on clause or a buyback clause, they might actually take away like a couple of £1 million from the actual fee, which then you've got to add up. Is it going to be worth it? Or is it going to be one of those where just take the fee now and just move on? If it's going to be one of those where Newcastle are being like a bit arsey about it, then forget about it. Just forget it. We don't want one. Just sell him. The priority is sell him whilst he's hot, more than the fact I want any buyback clauses or sell-on clauses or anything like that. Because the thing is, I don't know how good he can be. I've just not seen it where I'm like, yeah, that's an important factor. Otherwise, it would have been talked about more, but I just don't. The thing is, I think people are hoping he becomes something, and I think it's all in hope because of what Gnabry's done. But even when you look at Gnabry's not gone for a huge fee anyway. He's gone for, I think the highest he went for was 30 million to buy him. So it's not important to me anyway. I don't know what your opinion is on that.
Yeah. Well, I think we should, if we can, insert a sell-on clause at the very least on Joe Willock. But let's get George's opinion, because he's here, and I think he has a little bit of a different opinion on Willock. What is it, George? At least 50 appearances.
Whoa. You're rented an office now.
Where are you? What is this place? What is this place?
This is my side office. You know, it's a little bit late, so
not a side office.
Distribution center in it.
This is yeah. So what are we talking about?
George, okay, so we're talking about Willock, and you usually, you talk about 50 appearances, right, in their preferred position.
Always, yeah.
Always. You like Joe Willock's profile. You liken him to, the Gravenberches and these types of players that have that athletic build, that can run and score goals and all of that. But it's looking like Newcastle is willing to meet the valuation, Arsenal's valuation of Joe Willock at 22 million. It's keep or sell. Earlier when we talked about keep or sell, you said keep. Where are you at now with Joe Willock?
Okay, so the reason I love Joe Willock as a profile, he's got everything that you would want in a modern midfielder. Let's have that right. He's an elite prospect, but he's a free agent. So what I'm looking at right now, if he is not in the long-term plans towards a 4-2-3-1 or a pivot team, which I really think we are moving towards, then for his own development, he absolutely has to go at some point. But I want to have it right, because in terms of what you're looking at a profile, he's very unique, very raw. So you're looking at a player that can affect play in every single third of the pitch, somebody that gives you goals from midfield consistently, an absolute athlete who on the run can take things over 15 yards, 5 yards. He hits every metric that I absolutely love. And so for a player, for myself, there's no debate. If you at all think that number 8 is in your future in any sense, who again is a free 8 in a 3-man midfield, you're keeping Joe Willock. There really isn't much better on the market. And again, yeah, I do compare him to a Gravenberch, a Jude Bellingham. That is the type of profile you have. Now, I think some of the qualities are a little bit different between the three, but that is absolutely the profile you have. And so for Joe Willock to be any less, then yeah, I think it's kind of ridiculous, to be honest with you. But, and I make the but, where if you do not see Joe as part of your long-term plans, if you do not see Joe as playing in a three-man midfield in this team in the short term, in terms of 1 or 2 years, it is absolutely ridiculous to hamper a young kid as talented as that, who can do it, who has proven it. So yeah, for me, I would sell, but sell regretfully, because I hate it, because he's an absolute stellar talent. But unfortunately, I just don't see us moving towards a team where we do fit his style of play and his profile in the squad. So I sell regretfully, not because he's a bad player, just because he doesn't fit our team going forward. And in that case, if we're going to do it, buy somebody that does fit into our team better. But in terms of, yeah, on the ball, people questioning his composure or his first touch, it's actually one of his greater qualities, his first touch on the dribble. He's got that partay ability to receive and go in one fluid motion. It absolutely is elite. In fact, I would question that his decision-making on the run in the final third is what is holding him back. But if anybody watched him in the academy, he had that in abundance. Like, it wasn't even a case of, does Joe Willock have it? He has the IQ tenfold. He just gets a deer in headlights in adult football. And he's just a little bit away in terms of maturity. But you know what? He has every single quality you would want. So yeah, I'll probably sell now as opposed to keep, because I always felt, hey, maybe there's a possibility that we go three-man midfield. And if there is a slight 5-10% possibility, you're not selling that profile. That's a £100 million profile. I'm sorry. Somebody who's proven in the Premier League, 8-10 goals on the bounce, that's not coincidence. And so, yeah, for me, I regretfully sell, but only because I don't believe he's part of our long-term future with our tactics. So unfortunately, yes.
Sell on, buy back, both. What would you do?
Look, I think it's incredibly stupid to even not include a buyback clause, because he's going to explode. This isn't a question of a player. Does he make it? Does he not? No, Joe Willock is absolutely a Premier League player, and he's going to explode. I would absolutely put a buyback clause, but again, I would say, why would you sell if the plan is to go a three-man midfield in the short term? So I would want an absolute assurance from Arteta and Edu and whoever's in charge that, look, this is the way forward. This is our philosophy. And I think you sell straight. I don't think a buyback clause is actually feasible for us. I'll be honest with you. That doesn't really work in football terribly well. If we're managed to do it, then we've really pulled the pants down on Newcastle.
Yeah, do you know what it is? It's a difficult to answer, because when Arteta first came in, we were promised this 4-3-3 formation with a three-man midfield, where we were going to see like a City-style, Barcelona-style.
Who promised that, those souls? I just want
Arteta came out and said this.
I don't remember him ever coming
Arteta
out
came
and
out. He
saying,
said he wanted to implement a single pivot. I remember. I don't know where I read it.
No, he did. Look, Sauls, I'll back you up. He said it, but I've also said on stream before, what he's played is not a three-man midfield.
No.
That's the issue. But he has vocalized. He did say it in an interview.
Yeah, he said that he wanted to do. But the thing is, obviously, when we look at sort of our midfield options at the moment, it's not really. It can't be done yet. So this is where I think the Willock situation is very difficult to judge. Obviously, if I'm looking at it from the evidence standpoint, from what we've been doing and the signings we're bringing in, it doesn't look like we're moving away from the 4-2-3-1. But then I need that reassurance, because I'm hearing that Arteta still wants to do it, and that's the annoying thing. And it's like, we can't, like with the Willock situation, if he even has, I say even a 10% chance that he's going to turn into a 4-3-3, then you keep him, because like George said, I said it, if a number 8 at the moment doesn't fit, but if we're going to turn into that system, and this is where like the transfers make sense, and maybe we will regret it next summer when we start to bring that deep lying central defensive midfielder who can play on his own, and then he can allow Partey to be that more box to box, and then we can have a 3-8, and that's when we can transition. But it's not looking like we're moving to that, and it doesn't look like any profile of midfielder that we're looking to buy in is going to allow us to have a 3-8. Because we're bringing in 10s, and the thing is, if Maddison comes in, no doubt he can play an 8, but that's a huge investment, which you're bringing in solely for the number 10 position, to then turn around next summer and say, actually, we're going to go 4-3-3. So it's difficult.
And can I just say that I feel a lot of this has to do with the fact that we're not quite where we want to be, and maybe he does want to move to that 4-3-3, but it's also about what Joe Willock wants. I'm not convinced that we could ask Joe Willock to sign a new deal right now, and he would. His contract length is really, for me, what's driving. That's the biggest reason.
What is it, another 2 years?
Another 2 years, but he also is hell-bent on trying to make the World Cup squad for England. So he needs to be playing. And for me, if Jesse Lingard was on the cusp of making that team, then Joe Willock, if he has any sort of, form the way he did, I feel he has a chance, and he deserves to actually try to go for that. He can't go for that at Arsenal. He needs to do that at Newcastle. So I think a lot of where we are at the moment, the fact that we can't move on from Xhaka, or we're not going to, is stopping us from being able to progress that way if that's what Arteta really wants. Mm-hmm. And so our timelines are really off, but let's move on to James Maddison. It's just so funny, guys. We did our predictions and it came to bite me really quick. But he actually has to come in first before I concede. But this morning, reports coming out that the deal is progressing. I don't know how advanced it is, but the deal is progressing. There's a player plus cash deal on offer. That's what we want to do. We want to make the deal a little bit smoother for us, because Leicester want more than 60 million. I see a lot of people saying, well, we could offer 45 plus Ainsley Maitland-Niles. No, it's 60 plus somebody else, so that's really the deal that we're trying to get done. But for me, if you're going to keep Xhaka, we need that statement signing, and James Maddison is truly that. Now we're getting rumors that he wants to come. He's pressing the button. He wants to, it's just so funny. Just why would he want to come? I don't know, guys. I don't know. Because Arsenal is a bigger club than Leicester. We're seeing this silliness come about where people are trying to almost make arguments about how Leicester is bigger. They're just freaking not. I'm sorry, and I think James Maddison wants to be the man somewhere, and he can be that at Arsenal. The number 10 would never keep somebody from not wanting to come, especially if they naturally see themselves as an 8. And I understand the injury concerns. I get that. I understand that there's some statistics out there floating around that may be painting him in a way that's not quite the full picture. Maybe that makes us a little bit like, oh, maybe we shouldn't be spending this amount on James Maddison. But I'm telling you guys right now, this guy changes the game for us. This is not a player that comes in and we stay where we are. He'll be the pillar that we need in the center of the field creatively going forward. And we just don't have that, not with Smith Rowe either. So, I mean, George, this is it, isn't it? This is the marquee signing that you were kind of hinting at yesterday. We were talking about Ben White not being the last big signing we make, right?
Yeah, he's exactly that. I don't want to get too, technical with it, because we've had so many videos with it, and I encourage everyone to see how Sambi, both James Maddison and Ben White fit in. We had a great video on it, so I won't get too technical. I'll keep it really nice and sweet, really. But if you're replacing Joe Willock for somebody that solves the issue with goals, output efficiency in midfield, how do we solve the complementary pair of ESR, who is much more a tempo setter and a final ball, while also improving the form of Aubameyang? He is absolutely the man, and both on and off the pitch. Like tactically, again, I would refer to the video because we really went in depth, but purely off the pitch, he has an elite mentality. This is a bubbling player that is our franchise player. I've said this team, who's the man? If you ask who leads Arsenal, and I know Granit Xhaka, is a leader. I know we can float names about leaders, but who is the man at Arsenal? We don't have one. Who is the man for the Arteta project? We don't have one. Who is the man? I know no one wants to hear it, for the Amazon documentary that we suddenly did after years of never doing it. The idea that we wouldn't get a marquee signing was ludicrous for me. And so, okay, sure. If we want to get technical, I don't mind doing it for like 30 seconds. At the end of the day, when you're looking at Emile Smith-Rowe, you're looking at a wide playmaker at the current setting. He absolutely has the physical development to develop centrally, but fundamentally right now, he lacks consistently a final ball and he lacks goals from midfield consistently. I don't want that pressure on Emile Smith-Rowe. And when we're looking at our system, which by the way, I did tell everybody, we're moving towards an overlapping fullback system with pivots who are going to meet wide to cover for wide fullbacks. We saw this versus Chelsea. And so what you're looking at right now are our wingers are these pseudo 10s, these guys that like to drop in the half spaces, essentially, control with overloads. And that number 10 per se is going to contribute to kind of wide overloads wherever the ball is. So he's going to go and he's not going to function as a traditional 10. But what James Maddison is going to do, he's going to do that, but he's going to add a goal threat really in midfield. And when you compress the pitch, okay, to a halfway line defending team, and you have a floating player that gets the freedom like that, we don't have somebody with ball striking. We don't have somebody that can test the keeper from outside. We don't have somebody with a more consistent final ball. James Maddison solves all those things. So when you're looking at a struggling Aubameyang, who did James Maddison has his best relationship with? Jamie Vardy. Are they the same? Yes, they're very similar profiles of strikers. So when you start to look at the team, does he carry a set piece threat? Absolutely. Have we struggled to beat the first man since last season? Absolutely. In terms of him, he absolutely needs us just as much as we need him, by the way. So there's a lot of technical issues there about why he's great, but off the pitch as well. He's somebody that wants status. He wants a return to the England squad before the World Cup. He wants to gain the recognition as one of the top players in the division. And he doesn't do that unless moving to a traditionally top four club. With that.
George, what do you say to Bean Plays, who says, well, first Bean Plays said that he wasn't good enough to get into Leicester's starting lineup, and two, Maddison was nowhere near the England squad. You know, like, these are the narratives that I feel like are driven. You know, I'm not gonna say directly from Bean Plays, but I've seen these narratives kind of driven home, especially on Twitter, by certain accounts that are quite negative when they speak about Arsenal. But I mean, is this even a valid argument? Like, you know what I mean?
No, respectfully, it's complete hogwash. Maddison is only behind Kevin De Bruyne for chances created for his time in the Premier League. In terms of people saying he doesn't have a consistent final ball, that's also hogwash. In terms of his long kind of passes, he's only behind really Neymar and one of Atlanta's midfielders for long key passes. Every metric that you look at, James Maddison is creatively kind of up there in the 90th or in the 89th percentile for your creativity, in addition to guaranteeing you 10 goals or assists consistently a season. In terms of James Maddison not being number one at Leicester, that's absolutely ridiculous. He is number one at Leicester. In fact, he went on a game run of 13 goals and assists in 15 appearances prior to injury. So when you do look at it, he was absolutely first choice and they don't want to lose him. But the idea that he had an injury is really what derailed the season. And James Maddison, by the way, was on par to be one of the best cams in the country prior to injury. So when you are looking at that, it's just factually false. And he didn't have enough of a body of work over the season, given his injury, to warrant a place in the England squad. That was the reason. It wasn't a lack of quality. And I think, lastly, just really quickly, for anybody in injuries, it's not a long-term issue. If you do analyze it medically, yeah, it was a serious injury, but it absolutely isn't an issue kind of long-term in terms of his hip mobility. We're going to do our due diligence, and it's not an injury that I actually would be fearful for in terms of a long-term effect. And I really do think that when you look at a James Maddison, really, the idea that he's not an athlete, hogwash. He really was defending as an 8 in this system. And any kind of stat that you look at, Adam Vogue, one of our favorite statisticians, has cropped up with a lot of stats recently. And I kind of retweeted on my timeline about it in terms of what he is. And he did all of this as an 8. People don't even realize this, that Leicester don't play like that. They play in a 4-1-4-1. And so with James Maddison, he didn't even play with these numbers that he's achieving top in the country creatively as a number 10. He played it as an 8. And so when you are looking at that, it's not just that stats use it to back up your points, but they do dispel a horrible amount of narrative where James Maddison just works off set pieces. He's just an output machine. It's hogwash. He absolutely has spread out those chances much more. In fact, this is really only based off his first season with Leicester, where he was like that. The last past season do not show that in terms of his numbers. And when you do look at him, yeah, James Maddison, he's one person that will always go forward. He's great on the half turn. And this idea that he can't run back is just horrible. In fact, if you watch any Leicester games, he's the one leading the press and he's regularly throwing his hands up. Where's everybody with me? So he fits the absolute identical profile for what we need there. The issue has always been price, but I've told everyone I'm guaranteeing, I think, that James Maddison comes in. I'm actually afraid of what comes in after him. Not so much does James come in, because he is.
ML2 makes a point that I feel like is kind of overlooked a little bit, is don't forget Maddison was on par with Grealish just a season ago. I do remember distinctly, and I want to know if Souls agrees with me, that not this season, but the season where Aston Villa almost got relegated, Maddison was actually the guy that was being talked about and touted to get the $90 million move. It just never came to fruition. Now it's kind of switched a little bit, and now Grealish is the hot person. And what we tend to do is we want the person that's hyped more than the other person. And then so what we try to, it's almost like it's rationalized in our head that this person is not good, because they're not the hyped guy anymore. Grealish is great, but I remember distinctly the season prior to this one, Grealish was he's good, but let's see. Maddison was the star. He just happened to get injured this season. So what do you think about that? That maybe it's just about hype and we're trying to rationalize to ourselves that if we don't get Grealish and we get Maddison, we're getting the lesser, when this guy can also improve us.
The reality is Maddison was supposed to be in the England squad before the injury anyway, and Jack Grealish was the one that was going to be omitted from the England squad. So when you talk about it like that, are we not wanting Grealish now because he was also not meant to be in the England squad? And also, he was in the England squad and barely got a minute. So are we now not wanting him because it's not the starter for England? And when it comes to his injury, it's a hip injury. And guess who else has had a hip injury and come back fine? Our star boy, Bukayo Saka. Maybe not to the extent that James Maddison has had, but he's also suffering from hip injuries. So you can see sometimes they're not as concerning as we make it out to be. But then when we also kind of just look at the profile of player and whether he fits in our system, of course he does. He's someone that we need to do because his development as a player is far greater for his age than someone like an ESR at the moment. Now, ESR has a lot to learn, and he's also someone who struggles to keep fit, if that's what you want to say. It's not really injury fitness. It's just it's more of he's growing into his body. He's kind of getting fatigued because and look, I'm not a doctor. I don't have a clue why that is, but it's more just fatigue. It's not really anything to be concerned about. But as he develops and as he starts to play more minutes, I think that will just naturally, you'll be able to combat that just naturally. And we need a Maddison to come in for that. So, and also, we always forget that ESR was also used a lot as a wide playmaker. And that is something which Arteta does think of him as. Odegaard was more of the number 10 or the middle player who was overloading the wide sides, and ESR was predominantly the player on the left-hand side with, whoever was playing on the left-hand side, depending on whether Tierney was injured or not. And that's what Arteta wanted to do. So I do think what he wants to do is bring in a number 10 or a pure number 10 in Maddison and bring ESR for the moment anyway as a wide playmaker, and have that as the balance, because in those games we're more controlling of the ball and more controlling of possession, and that's what he wants to do. He wants to dictate games, and that's how we do it. And the funny thing is, I really don't understand how Arsenal fans, after complaining about us not being able to sign big players, we're complaining about signing a big player.
After Willian playing number 10, you guys.
Willian, it's like we complain about the fact we can't attract these big players, we can't make moves for someone, and it's like when United bought Maguire, and Maguire at that point hadn't proved anything, and that's a fact. Like, he hadn't proved he was the Maguire they bought. Everyone at the time was questioning the signing. Why did they pay £80 million for Maguire? And he's still yet to really prove his value, but he's been good. And he has had a very good Euros campaign. And the problem is, and when people talk about injuries and Maddison, it's a bit hypocritical.
It's a lie, Souls. I'm really sorry.
No, but it's hypocritical, because
But
Why
it's
not?
also a lie. Since 2018, Grealish has missed 31 games due to injury, and James Maddison has only missed 13. It's factually wrong. It's not even like,
No.
I know it's hypocritical, but it's also just factually wrong.
Yeah, but the reason why I say it's hypocritical is because ESR is also struggling. Well, he's struggling more for fitness more than he is injuries.
Yeah.
So we know it's a concern. There's a different type of concern with ESR, and
It's
when
still
people,
a concern, yeah.
do you know what I mean? So it's a bit of
Yeah.
a, well, you can't have it both ways. And look, we don't know. It could turn out that Maddison constantly gets injured, or it could turn out that he's injury free for the rest of his career. We don't know. We never. We
I
can
mean,
never.
look at Thomas. Look at
Yeah.
Thomas. You never really know what's going to happen. And Yannick says we want to sign the right players, and I hear
But he
you
is
on
the
that.
right player.
He is the
But-
right player.
But we also, like, I would even say this is our opinion, and there are other people that believe that this is not the right signing. But guess what? We won't know until they actually play for Arsenal Football Club.
We can sign KDB and it can flop.
We make these definitive statements about what's right and what's wrong based on our own opinions. They're all opinions until we actually see what's going on. So for me, it's just, I get the whole right players thing, but how do we know what's the right player just because this YouTuber says this and this other YouTuber says that? These are all of our opinions. We could be completely wrong on this, but I don't want to get caught up in right or wrong. We're just saying that this is our opinion. And you saying that maybe he's not the right player is also your opinion, which could mean absolutely nothing in the end of the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so really quickly, I want to do this so that we're not biased, but really what it comes down to, guys, on a technical level is how do you keep central compactness and numerical superiority for our chance creation? Because we do wide overloads, and that is slightly different depending if you do a traditional pivot or if you do a three-man midfield. Okay. In the first case, you achieve your wide overloads because you've got fullbacks that are high and wide, and you've got the pivot to kind of cover wide space, and your number 10 is a floater in between. Okay, that is the one method of chance creation. And then you've got your three-man midfield, where typically one center mid overloads on one side, and you've got one fullback overloading the opposite. And what you need is you've got a central lone pivot, but you've got that alternate fullback who's inverted. That's the differences between the two. And if your version is a number 8 version, and we've had these debates, then you're going to be more amenable to an Awar, more amenable to an Odegaard. Those are the more types of traditional interior 8s that you're going to like. But if you're more kind of towards a pivot, which we've kind of done the evidence for quite clearly that
once
that is
you
the
have
way
Xhaka
forward.
in your team, you are a pivot team.
Yes, and not to
So
mention
there.
there's that. But again, in the end, James Maddison is your more traditional number 10. And so look, yes, I'm more amenable. I think Jess is, and I think kind of Souls as well. We're more amenable to that type of player. But that seems to be the way that we are playing. And no, Bruno is not a number 8. Bruno is very clearly a number 10. In fact, he got dropped as a number 8 in the Euros. I think I would go back. He got dropped as a number 8 for Portugal, playing like 20 minutes. So yeah.
But
and
these
again,
are just numbers, aren't they? Like,
they
this
are.
is also, we're getting really fixated on what we see on transfer market. What position does he play? It's about where he occupies space on the pitch. Does he fill the requirement in terms of the technical requirements of what we need, the profile mentally as well, the age profile? All of those things tick the boxes. If we're going to get bogged down on is he an 8 or is he a 10, I think we're losing a little bit of the argument here and getting bogged down and try to figure out how we can make our argument be right. And that's not actually what we're arguing right now.
And sorry, Jess, like I think these systems are way more similar than they are different. And like these people that are arguing these things are just doing a FIFA argument about where they find them, like you said, on Transfermarkt, when in reality, we build in a 3-2-5 and then we attack in a 2-3-5. That's the same, by the way, if you're in a 3-man midfield or if you're in a 2 or a traditional 2. We just achieve the same pattern, just slightly differently. And the idea that we really change our overall philosophy is kind of really ridiculous. Maybe it's worth kind of doing an actual tactical show where we can outline these differences for people kind of very technically about it. But really, I do get frustrated when people say, oh, he can't work, he's an 8. Oh, he can't work because he's a 6. No, these numbers don't matter because the positions on the pitch are far more alike than they are different.
Yeah, for sure. So I think this one is it's gonna be split. I think a lot of us have a different idea about what we want this attacking midfielder to be. You know, some people are really fixated on Buendia. Some people really want Awar. Some people loved Odegaard. And then others really want Maddison. But ultimately, let's just see what happens with the club and see who gets there. And whoever gets there, we're going to back them, because we wouldn't want them to do good, right? But let's talk a little bit about Martinez. I saw in the comment section or in the chat that somebody was like, hey, Jess, did you know that it looks like we're not getting him? And it feels like that's probably has something to do with Lukaku news. I did see, I think Chelsea are like, if they haven't already, they're preparing a new bid to sign Romelu Lukaku.
Fabrizio just said, I don't know if you did notice that, but there's a new bid, proposals around 120 to 130.
That's what I was reading right now. Yeah. So they really want him, and they're most likely going to get him. I can't see Inter in their situation turning that down, which a lot of people, which I think is a valid thing, is that why would Inter want to sell both of their strikers at once? That's very complicated and a little bit far-fetched in my mind. I always felt like if they got Lukaku, then that was Martinez done. But there were reports that had come out that he's open to coming to us. We want him. Inter's willing to sell. But again, we have these two players, Lacazette and Nketiah, that are still here. So it's difficult for us to get a deal like that done, especially when you're dealing with somebody like Chelsea on the other side who have just money to burn and they can kind of just get this thing done. Is it happening or is it not? I think yesterday your guys' prediction was that we weren't going to get a striker. That would be kind of in line with this, but seeing that there's legs to this and really reliable reporters were coming out and saying that we are interested in Lautaro and we are in some sort of talks. What do you think about just the aspect of us going after players of this caliber, of this status? We may have differences of opinion in terms of like, does he fit our system and stuff like that? But ultimately, this is a player that makes you sit up and notice like, oh, we're going after somebody that will cost 70 million. Do you think that's a good look for Arsenal? Like, Souls, what do you think about that? Like, is it a good look to see us going after Locatelli and Lautaro Martinez, even if we don't get them?
Well, there's two ways to look at it. One is the fact that we're turning their heads. Martinez is actually interested in wanting to come to Arsenal, and that's a good sign. At the end of the day, Arsenal hasn't just all of a sudden lost all its pulling power. We are still a traditional top team. We're one of the most globally watched teams. We've got a global superpower. We are a massive global franchise, if that's what you want to call it, a global brand that can get millions and millions of eyes on you. Even if you look away from that, it's the Premier League. It's the biggest stage in world football on a weekly basis. It's got the highest ticket sales. It's got the highest watch numbers. And even your average games, when you're playing the likes of Burnley, have more views than most major events. And that goes to show, and Martinez may be looking at it like that. And at the end of the day, in modern football, money talks. He's at 80k a week at Inter Milan without any hope that that's going to increase because of their financial situation. We're willing to offer him triple that. We're willing to offer him nearly £200,000 a week because we will be getting Lacazette off the books very soon. So they may be taking that hit for one season and bringing him in. Now, I think it was always going to be Maddison or Martinez. It was never going to be both. I just don't think it was ever going to be, well, not even feasible, but I just think it's one of those where I think the priorities are in different areas. And I think if Martinez came in, we were going to go get a central midfielder. If we didn't get Martinez, it was going to be James Maddison. But I do think it's going to be Maddison and a midfielder coming in before I think a striker will come in, due to the fact I don't actually think Lacazette will leave. And that is, I know it's a bold prediction to make, but I look at it one of two ways. I think Arsenal are trying to offload him, but the buying clubs are telling Lacazette, look, what would you rather? Us pay Arsenal £15 million or just give it to you in different ways, whether it's a sign-on bonus or just increase weekly wages. Now, obviously, logically, when you're trying to leave a club anyway, you may as well wait it out a year, play your football, do what you need to do, and then just go get your massive... And don't forget, he's 31, I believe. It's more than likely his final major payout. So he's going to take what he can get. It's like what Willian did coming to us. He got a better offer at Arsenal than he did at Chelsea. So he took it, and now he's just chilling. But what it shows is intent. What it shows is we're trying to reassert that dominance that we once had. Now, traditionally, even in our successful periods, even in our eras of dominance, we never did this. We never went out and bought the marquee players or the cover boys or the magazine stars or, oh yeah, this guy's being talked about. We're always the underdog signers. We always sign players who are on the brink of that or who can be a superstar, but just haven't been found yet. But in the modern day, that's never going to work. You need a mixture of that. You need a mixture of potential, and you need a mixture of people who are kind of there, which is a Martinez. I'm not saying they can't improve, but they're a ready-made talent. They're sort of, yeah, you kind of play them. Yes, they may need a tweak here and there, or they may just need a little bit of work on, but it's more of the final product. And that's kind of how you reassert, and that's how you play the modern game. Look at United; they've traditionally gone away from their sort of common signings, where they used to buy young superstars like your Cristiano Ronaldos, like your Cantonas. That's also moved on. Now they're buying your sub-20s, your 25, 26-year-old Pogbas and your Brunos, and even now Sancho, who's 23, 24. That's not really what they used to do. They used to buy superstar teenagers and make them into global superstars, like your Wayne Rooney's, your Cristiano Ronaldo's of the modern day. But it's about playing with the big boys, and that's what it shows. It shows, okay, financially, okay, we may not be able to go get Haaland or Mbappe's, but you're sort of, I wouldn't even say second choices, but I would say players who command a lot of respect from these big sides, these traditional top 4, top 6s, or even look, Barcelona have been trying to pursue him for how many seasons now? 2-3 seasons.
Yeah.
So why do we as Arsenal try and snub that? That shows Barcelona were looking at him, but you know what? We can play with Barcelona and we can turn ahead, and that's what it ultimately shows me.
Can I just, okay, so there's a report that came out from, I think his name is Francesco Porzio. He works with Fabrizio Romano, and he said Inter won't sell both Lukaku and Lautaro. So I think that kind of solidifies the whole, or kind of ends the entire thing about Chelsea's going to get this done. Like, I cannot see, I think Inter wanted to sell Lautaro more than Lukaku.
Of course they did.
But because, Lukaku, I feel like Lukaku is harder to replace, but you can't turn down 130 million. You know what I mean? So I think that kind of ends that a little bit. But what I want to say is that, when we have comments like this, Martinez would not look at how many online fans Arsenal have. Martinez will look at what we do on the pitch, where we finish and what we win. I just struggle to kind of understand why reliable journalists come out, multiple, some on Arsenal side and some not, validate not only our interest, but concrete talks that we're having with Lautaro Martinez. And we still try to push a narrative that's really just negativity driven based on kind of where we are, and ignore the fact that we are actually interested in a player. He is interested in coming to us.
It's self-deprecating, Jess, and I'm sorry, it annoys me, because how in the world, if I'm going to follow that logic by a lot of fans, is it that Thomas Partey switched and joined us when we were 8th? How does that make sense to any logic when he left a Champions League team to join 8th place Arsenal that we keep saying that we are? It's ridiculous. Legacy outweighs many of the arguments of short-term success. That really is what it is. And, all you have to do is look at, rivals across the road, everybody striving to achieve that legacy that some of the top 4 clubs have. And that's why I'll always say, no matter how bad Liverpool, Man United, us are, we will never lose that power and that draw because we have dominated for decades. Now, that doesn't mean then that we can forget the past, that we can forget mistakes, and that everything's fine and dandy. But this idea that, Arsenal aren't able to compete with the best of the best, despite our history, is absolute ridiculous. And really, it's just false. It's self-deprecating for no reason.
We haven't tried to. I think that's another thing that people tend to forget, is that we're making up things based on something that we've never seen. We've actually never really gone after players that are high quality, or like we do every once in a while, but we never really do it to this level. When's the last time you heard of us actually putting in a bid for a player in pre-prime that just had a really good Euros, like somebody like Locatelli? When's the last time you've seen this? And when we have, we've gotten them. That's Thomas Partey, that's your Aubameyang. So this whole thing about this made up thing about how we can't attract, and these players don't want us. It's if you don't like the club because they're not competing to the level that you feel like they should be,
Just
then
to
that's fine.
debunk
But you don't
that,
have to project it and ignore facts. Like, we're actually ignoring facts here that he is interested in
but
coming to
we've
Arsenal.
got a current sign. Well, not us. United have got a current signing that debunks the entire argument, which is Rafael Varane. He actually said one of the major reasons he wanted to join Man United was because of the love the fans showed. So they do look at
Gabriel
this stuff.
said the same thing.
Yeah, so it's like the thing is, what you've got to understand in the modern day, especially right in this sort of, I'd say in this sort of 10-year span, Arsenal have still got a lot of their history that can help them get players. Because what you've got to understand is a lot of these players who are now coming through had your Henrys, your Bergkamps, your Vieiras, your Tony Adams on their posters, like on their bedrooms and stuff like that. They grew up watching these players and admiring these players, and that's why when they see Arsenal have come for them, it was that dream. It was that sort of, oh my god, like I can play for the club Henry played for, I can play for the club Bergkamp played for. It's like that childhood dream of theirs. Of course, that may fizzle out in years to come if we continue to go down the path that we're going now. But whilst we have it, we can try and use it to build where we need to go. Partey was a long-term Arsenal fan. He was a lifelong Arsenal fan. He loved Arsenal from a kid, from when he was younger, and that is going to happen because we're a global reach. And also, the fans play a massive part in it. If a player is getting so much abuse or so much sort of stick for joining a club, they're never gonna come. They're gonna see that the whole modern game is based on social media, and it's prominent because otherwise, why would they care about online abuse if it doesn't affect them, or if they don't see it? But they do, game in, game, and that shows you they're weekly active on this. They're not like just, oh, the transfer window's open, let me see what people are thinking about me. No, it's every game, after every training session, after, I don't know, whatever they do, they see this stuff because there's a whole global campaign about online abuse. Well, clearly shows it affects them, whatever we say.
There's that, Souls, and look, at the end of the day, the Premier League is a massive machine. Let's not, I'm not sitting here downplaying the idea that these great players didn't move for more money and more wages, but the idea that, that they came to Arsenal, who, by the way, are competing with other players. For example, Thomas Partey, this argument that he just moved for money, Thomas Partey could have fit in Manchester United. Why didn't they go for him? What, they didn't need a DM? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Of course they did need a DM, but at the end of the day, Thomas Partey was an Arsenal fan. It worked out. We were willing to pay the money, and yeah, sure, we spent wages. But I don't understand this argument because fans have plagued Arsenal for never competing for decades, for us not paying the wages, for us not paying our superstars, not allowing our superstars to leave for competing for wages. The money argument is really void for me. When we talk about authority in the market and us willing to do that, that's a direction from the board that I think is actually positive. And then when we actually do it, fans are critiquing, oh, that's too much. And then we become accountants and we're worried about long-term effects, about wage bills. And, look, I get in accumulation when it goes too far and you start doing the Ozils and you start letting people go on freeze. That's never good business. That's dumb. We know that. But this idea that we're finally willing to put our name in the hat for some big boy players is anything but negative. And I'm really tired of seeing this from fans that's saying, oh, he would never come. That's stupid from us. Why would we do that? Well, because we're trying to change our image. And unless you want us to sit there and accept our fate, then I'm really kind of tired of people not understanding that we are the Arsenal, not just Arsenal. Okay, that really needs to stop right now. And we all need to start taking ownership and be a part of the culture change that I know Mikel Arteta wants. You don't do that in terms of players or off the pitch. You do that as fans. We need to sit here and make sure that we're in an environment for people to want to come. This idea that young players will want to come and play for Arsenal because it has an environment to succeed. And, we really need to stop this right now. And at the end of the day, okay, you can only praise good moves. You can only praise intent. And I'm not going to sit here and critique Arsenal for going after Lautaro Martinez. I'm not going to critique the club for going to go and pay the wages that Thomas Partey would have demanded. And that is nothing but positive. And if you're going to turn that into negative, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm sorry, you're just sitting there accepting your fate, and you're not more objective because you're negative. That's not the case. Okay.
I completely get that. And I mean, we just sat here and named like so many examples, and
Aubameyang, Ozil, Alexis,
I could give you more.
Kieran Tierney.
they only come to win trophies. I get that, but there are other reasons why players come, and we've seen that over the years, so it is what it is. But let's end on a more positive note. I want to talk about Aziz. Reports came out today that he's not going out on loan, which is something that we talked about earlier. In a future. Well, yeah, the future, George. But it's something that we spoke about in a past stream that I personally felt like it would be almost like selfish not putting him out on a loan, because maybe he won't get playing time, but maybe this speaks to Arteta feeling like maybe he'll have a role, because we are a little bit light in midfield. Do you think, George, I'll give this to you because you've watched him so much more than I have. Do you think that there is a role for Aziz to play in the first team that we can look forward to? I mean, he looked good, but I mean, it was like a preseason match. So where do you think he is in terms of his development?
I mean, I said this from a long time ago. He's physically ready. This is the difference between these youngsters. When you're looking at Miguel Aziz, there's just not much that you don't love. The kid is an absolute modern midfielder that has potential everywhere. What I love is he affects every single phase of the pitch. Okay, he has elite scanning constantly. We saw it in the Europa League on the half turn, and I always quote it, where he was receiving kind of back towards a marker. He scanned, he saw, and he was able to evade the press with a little cute half turn. Another thing that Aziz has that's over Lukaku, by the way, is final third output. And this is why I'm so high on Miguel Aziz, where he carries much of the same scanning, ability on the ball, half-turn ability in the challenge. He's great over long yards, over the 5-yard burst. There's your bingo for everyone looking for it. But he also has long-range shots, and he's cute in the final third where he's got a final ball. Look, he's literally got everything. This is a kid I have massive, massive hopes for. And when you're looking at the reasons why he hasn't been set out on loan, it's purely because of his physical development. And so there is no pressure at this point because we do have our starters. And when you're looking at it, you typically look on if a player is physically developed. And that is really the barrier to introducing them into the first team. Because I think technique-wise, there's not much that you really teach these players. There's little tweaks in terms of positioning. There's little things that you can coach into a player's game. But when you're looking at introducing an 18-year-old, which is what he is, right? He is quite young. You make sure that they're physically ready. And that is why Aziz is actually going to be here, and why I always told people, look, he is physically dominant. He's got legs that are like a man. He really does. And, he the way he plays, there's a certain maturity about him.
He's been missing them upper body workouts, though. He needs to work on them arms. They're not carrying the same energy.
Hey, it's okay. You know what? We love that here as football players, don't we? Like, that's the one time that you don't want them to skip leg day. But look, it's weird, but I use that because Saka is actually brilliant at this, and I use it as a predictor for what youth are able to translate, right? I do look at leg strength. I do look at low center of gravity and ability to ride challenges. When you look at Aziz, no matter how big he is, if he's facing adults, and he did it in the Europa League, if somebody hits him, he's able to roll the challenge. And Saka does this brilliantly. It's one of his superpowers, right? And that is what gives him his 5 yards of extra kind of seconds. And that's huge in the game. Whenever you get a kind of a little extra little pace on your marker, that's what you need to exploit. And look, I'm running out of superlatives to kind of love Miguel Aziz. He's absolutely excellent. He's actually been highlighted by the Spanish division for a real big fast track himself. And he is, I know he's got English heritage, but, Guillem Balaguer did a great side piece on him much earlier that really focused how much kind of potential the Spanish division even sees in him. And so when you're looking at it, I think Miguel Aziz can be anything he wants. I prefer him as an 8. I think he's a true box-to-box midfielder. Again, yeah, I was very much concerned when we got Lukaku because I did feel they were very similar in terms of their qualities together. But Miguel Aziz is much more of a higher-up center mid. And I think we can kind of see that Lukaku could develop deeper. He absolutely could. I don't see him. That's where he's best, but he could. Miguel is definitely one to contribute with goals. And I think we've seen that in his limited experiences here.
I mean, and I see a lot of comments about like he's not ready. Like he's not ready. Is he not ready to play a Carabao Cup game? Is he not ready to play an early FA Cup game? Like I think when we're saying that can he play a role, we're not saying can he start games in the Premier League day in and day out. We're saying can he fill in? Wouldn't you prefer to see Aziz play an early Carabao Cup game than watch El Neni? Wouldn't you? Like you see what I'm saying? So when we talk
Arsene
about
Wenger
ready,
used to
we're
do
not.
this.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, Arsene Wenger used to do this brilliantly, where he used to bring the balance in, and you'd always see it, regardless of opposition in the Carabao Cup or the FA Cup. Early stages, he'd always bring the youth into it, regardless of whether we had a potential to lose that game. He would bring them in, and I think Miguel Aziz is needed to, especially for those earlier rounds. We need, because we've not got the biggest of squads. A Carabao Cup against a League Two side, or a League Two side or a Championship side, that's where you test these guys. That's where you bring them in to get them physically ready. Because I'm not going to lie, the Premier League is softer than the Championship. The Championship teams are a lot rougher in the way they play because they're a lot more raw, and they've not got the technical ability of the Premier League. But that's what they do. And I think with Aziz, what you've also got to understand, he went a massive transformation over the summer. He's built himself to be able to be ready if he's called upon for the first team. And that's something which you have to look at. They wouldn't just do that if he's still going to play under 23 games and he's gone over this whole transformation and used a lot of the summertime to develop his body ready. It's like what Bale did when he got told, look, your physique isn't there. And he came out and he looks like an absolute beast. It's the same with Rashford. When he had his breakout season, he got told to hit the gym in the summer, comes out, he's got a better physique, he's a lot stronger, he's a lot more muscular, and he's now ready to play in the Premier League. And Aziz has done that before he's ready for before he's set to go into the Premier League. And that'll only help him. And like, obviously George said, he's got all the attributes. Plus, he's got the goals in midfield. Plus, he actually fits into the system Arteta's trying to play. So it ticks a lot of boxes. But yes, I wouldn't throw him into the Premier League and say, there you go, have your chance. If you do well, you do well. It's not a sink or swim moment. It's more of we've got an opportunity where the pressure's not on us for cup competitions. Because our focus should be the Premier League and how we get back into Europe and how we develop in the league more than it is to win an FA Cup or a Carabao Cup. Yeah, it'd be brilliant if we go win them, but it shouldn't divert our attention from the Premier League. So the pressure's not on him. And that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and I hear people are like, well, we can't just give away we can't just throw away his development. Like the best thing for him would be to go out on loan. And I kind of hear you, but I want to keep the same energy. I just feel with our midfield, it's touch and go at the moment because we just don't have the numbers that we require. So somebody is going to have to be sacrificed. And quite frankly, I'd rather sacrifice Aziz for maybe a year and make sure that I get the money for Willock, because that money will not be there. And we can always send Aziz on a loan the season after. Somebody needs to fill in that space, and we just don't have them. Torreira's not coming back. What if we don't bring somebody in? What if we don't buy somebody? I'd rather Aziz be in the squad than Willock, because we could actually get 22 million for Willock, and we may not ever get that chance again.
Well,
somebody's going to get sacrificed.
And you know what, Jess, like really quickly, the path I see is very much a 2018 Saka-esque cameo in terms of what he's going to contribute. And, in terms of people saying, is he ready? Is he not ready? Look, I've watched Miguel Aziz for quite a while, and I believe he's ready for all the physical attributes, but also maturity in his game. And, I think these are the same people that want a Camavinga, by the way. So it's really quite ironic. He's like 1 year less, and of course he's got first team football. I'm not making a loose comparison there. It's just this idea that if the club feel that he's ready, which I completely agree with, it makes more sense for him, if he's a well-developed talent, to kind of stay with us, fix in with the first team, train with the big boys, learn the system, than it does going out on loan. Because really, I used loans to iron out inconsistencies in technique as well as maturity. And I don't see that in his game. He's very mature. And so the best thing for Miguel, to be honest with you, is actually making sure that he stays with the first team, gets a taste of first team minutes in the right environment, in the right game, because we can pick and choose this, right? As opposed to sending him out on loan to a team where we don't know the minutes, we don't know how he's going to be used, we can control that development, and then just make the decision the following year. There's really no pressure for myself. So I love this. And by the way, Keto Taylor Hart is doing a very similar thing, who's on a very similar path.
It feels almost like I'm seeing a lot of like these comments, like when we're supposed to, I'm not telling you how to be a fan, but I feel like we are forcing ourselves to underrate our academy kids, you know, and we tend to look outside of our own academy and decide that they're so much better. I'm sorry. If you put Azeez, Emil Smith-Rowe, you know, Keto Taylor-Hart, if you threw them all into Germany or you threw them in France, they would thrive. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's, I get the whole, like, okay, Camavinga is world class. I get that. But he's playing in France. Like, you know what I mean? These kids are talented as well. So I feel like we almost, like, go too far. You know what I mean? Like, trying to play down our academy. Our academy turns out, our academy turns out really talented. You know what's really sad about it is that rival fans actually say more positive things about our young players than our own fans. Like, we're constantly trying to play them down, and I don't really know why, but there's 360 of you guys watching on all platforms. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. We have covered it all. I want to thank Yves Basuma for the super sticker. Thank you so much. That was so kind. And for all of you guys for being in the chat, I really appreciate it. All different perspectives. And yes, we're not always going to agree, but I always appreciate your guys' perspective, and I hope you guys appreciate ours. I would hope that if you're watching us that you do appreciate our perspective and all of that. So again, there won't be a show tomorrow as I will be doing something else for LAFC, but I'll be back on Thursday, hopefully talking about some more, you know, transfers. I think this is kind of an exciting day. I don't know about you guys. It was getting a little dull around here. So yeah, but you guys remember, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this with a friend, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.
Thank you.